Oh, okay. So talking about strong men, I, I am so pleased to introduce Senator Jerry Hill this evening as we say goodbye for now and thank him for his excellent service in the California legislature, first as our assembly member and then as our senator. Jerry has been a very good friend to San Mateo County Democracy for America. He's always listened intently and respectfully to our ideas, and he's answered our questions, and he's told us when we were wrong. But he has, as I said, he's been a good friend. Jerry has had quite a career in politics. He started out as a council member, San Mateo City Council, and then he went on to become a hardworking supervisor, and then on to the Assembly and to the Senate. Most recently, Jerry chaired the Senate's Labor, Public Employment, and Retirement Committee and the Subcommittee on Gas, Electric, and Transportation Safety. And Jerry has certainly made his mark in that respect, in safety, as PG&E well knows. And I'm hoping he'll tell us a little bit tonight where that stands. I know that Jerry was one of the authors of the legislation dealing with PG&E's with their bankruptcy. So he'll tell us about that. Another thing that he's been very interested in from the beginning, he's had a lifelong commitment to clean air. And when he was on the San Mateo City Council, he introduced the first ordinance in the state to prohibit smoking in restaurants and the workplace. And he's continued that on most recently in the Senate by his bill that prohibited the sale of flavored vapor and tobacco products. So that was quite wonderful. And also, Jerry was had legislation when he was in the Assembly to include California in the national popular vote effort. So we're great. That's one we're interested in, and we're very grateful to him for that. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Senator Jerry Hill.
Ashley, thank you. Oh, you're very too kind. Diana, thank you very much. And Joanne, it's wonderful to be with you. It's so funny when I finally got, I had the wrong Zoom number and I was texting Ashley to get the right number. I was coming up with some strange thing. And then when I finally got on, I heard Gail say, and I heard her, she was making her comments and she said, Trump and rational mind in the same sentence. And when I heard that, I said, wait, I must be on the wrong Zoom call. This is not the place that I want to be tonight. There's something wrong with that. But it is great to be with all of you and to see all your faces because, you know, as we don't get out much anymore, it's so great to be with you and to recognize you. There's a warmth that goes with these calls that the Zoom that we don't see on a phone call or a conference call. So thank you for the introduction, Ashley, and thank you for being a great friend for all of these years. I've always enjoyed our friendship and our relationship and our conversations with that. And it's great to see Diana and Harvey and Elsa, and Susie. It's wonderful to look around and see familiar Marshall and to hear you. It's just nice to be with everyone tonight. And thank you for mentioning a couple of those things that kind of got me going in the legislature. And you know, you mentioned Joe Simitian, a good friend to all of us. When I just got into the Assembly 12 years ago, I had lunch. Joe took me to lunch. I think he does that with every new member at the time to kind of talk and help you out if you have any questions and things. And we were talking and he said, well, there are two types of legislators, people who come to the legislature. One who comes and and really, wants to cure air, not air quality, but let's say climate change, or stop fracking and oil production in California, or mental health issues. They're focused on one major agenda and one thing that they really are passionate about and want to solve. And I didn't have that when I came, so I'm kind of that other person that I guess, coming from a city council and a board of supervisors, and kind of a generalist. And so things that would come around that I would see or notice that would passionately affect me. And a lot of times it would, I found that I would get mad, and I've shared this before with others. I would get, issues would come up and things, I say, that's wrong. And I can cite many examples of that in legislation. I mean, a constituent, a 16-year-old girl came and called me and said that there was a 13-year-old girl in her school who was engaged to be married to a 28-year-old from another country. And that was legal. That was okay. I mean, I don't know if it wasn't okay, but there was nothing the school could do about it. No one. And I said, that's crazy. And then I found out it was true. 1, 2, it's legal. In California, there's no minimum age. So that made me mad. I'm thinking, look at the abuse that we all know, the statistics of when someone gets married at a young age, the divorce rate, the abuse, the poverty, the lack of education, all of these things come into play. So I did what I could to change that in a way that made it now couldn't increase the age to 18, which was my goal. But what we were able to do was, now at the time, all you had to do was have one parent agree to it and a judge check a box, and that was it. The child could get married. Now he has to go through family court services, has to interview everyone to make sure that things are right and that there's no coercion, and that that there's something there. If there's any semblance of or chance of any abuse, it goes to family court services. The judge has to now interview the child and everything else to see if there's something there, and can say no without a problem. So we made it a little more difficult, but that's this challenge of compromise with legislation. But that made me mad. But air quality is an interesting one that Ashley mentioned. And it was in high school. And this is where I find that's so great about this country. When you get elected, you bring your personal experiences, your history with you. And that kind of, I don't want to say dictates, but it enhances what you do in legislation. I remember in high school in San Francisco in 1964, playing football. We all remember those summer, we still have the Indian summer days where it was 90 degrees, hot, humid, and dry, and the smog was so thick in the air. And in San Francisco, when they were burning tires around the bay and doing all of these things, there was a lot of smog. And I remember playing football in September. I could not run 10 yards without buckling over on my knees, coughing and hacking. The air was so thick. And that I knew something was wrong then. And then I had an opportunity to do something about it. And that's what's so wonderful about what I've been able to do for the last 30 years in public office, is to make the change that I find was necessary as a member of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and then as a member of the California Air Resources Board appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger, and then as an assembly member, and as a senator, and the work that we were able to do in the Environmental Quality Committee. So all of those things to improve the air. And smoking is a similar thing. I had the first ordinance in the state to prohibit smoking in restaurants, bars, and the workplace. And then I found that I saw just the devastating effect of what tobacco smoke has on people. And I wanted to change it, especially to see the addictive nature for children. And what we found at the end of the day, with a lot of I've had a number of laws actually in the sale of tobacco to minors, and how we've now made it much more difficult. And now they can actually lose their license for selling tobacco. Before my law, you could never lose your license to sell tobacco in California. Now you can if you sell to minors. But one of the issues that got me is the flavored tobacco in vaping started the issue for me. When you found that a 59% increase of high school students were smoking vaping products, and a 78% high school, 58% a middle school student increase in 1 year smoking those vaping products that we don't know the health effect, but they're getting addicted to nicotine. And we know once they're addicted to nicotine, whether they have a vaping device, and if they don't have that device, they're going to go buy a cigarette because they need that injection of nicotine to support that. But more importantly, what we found is how the tobacco industry has been targeting communities of color with menthol cigarettes for decades. And they have been doing that by marketing into those communities, as well as offering lower prices for their products in those communities. And that is tragic because we know the lives that are taken because of smoking and that addiction and what it affects on lung and the asthma and everything that go with it. So that's why I find that legislation that was just passed 2 months ago in August, and the governor signed it, and now the tobacco industry is out collecting signatures for a referendum, just as they did with the bail industry. Prop 25 that we probably all voted for, but it failed because the bail industry spent so much money to confuse the voters and to tell them a false narrative of that bill. But there's another, that's the tobacco industry is trying to collect now, and they have till the end of November to collect 624,000 valid signatures in California. If they do, then this will be on the ballot in 2022 to overturn my bill, SB 793, that will become law January 1st if they don't get those signatures. So it's the abuse that we're seeing of money and big business is horrendous in California. And that's why I'm so happy for the work that you do, Democracy for America, and especially the San Mateo contingent that we're with today, because you're just there fighting all the time, and I admire that and appreciate it. But it's interesting that every 4 years, it seems, especially after 2000, when I did the national popular vote bill, that is to me what we need. And fortunately now there are 16 jurisdictions. And let me just briefly, for those who don't know what this is, I think everyone probably does, but it's there's a compact that has been formed right now with 16 jurisdictions. It was my legislation that got California as part of it. Jerry Brown signed it into law. And we have agreed to sign on to this compact. The compact now has 16 jurisdictions, and those 16 states and the District of Columbia, 15 states and the District of Columbia, they equal right now in total 196 electoral votes. 196 electoral votes. When we can get enough states to join the compact where the total equals 270 electoral votes, then that compact will take effect. And at the next presidential election, whichever candidate nationwide wins the popular vote, every state that joined that compact has agreed that all of their electoral votes will go to that candidate. So the popular vote will be the determinant of who will become president of the United States. And that's the part that's exciting about it. And we're getting closer. Probably maybe not in my lifetime, but the agreement is still there, and we're not going to get out of that. So I'm really excited about it. And so I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions too, but I just wanted to just share that it's interesting. I did find that I get angry at things that I see are unjust, and the injustices that we find in society. I mean, a couple of years ago, I had a doctors on probation bill that I found that there was so much abuse by many physicians and doctors who were practicing medicine, abusing their patients, and then getting the medical board will place them on probation, but never requiring that the physician tell their patient, the new patients, that they're on probation for sexually assaulting previous patients. So there are no conditions other than they cannot see a female patient unchaperoned. But who's in the office to monitor that? No one. Today, if that happens, and the California Medical Association was not very happy with me in this bill, and they fought hard. But fortunately, and I have to in a way, thank the Me Too movement, because the Me Too movement brought out a lot of that anger and upset that we've seen and experienced with the discrimination and the assault and the abuse around sexual conduct. And we had the Olympic athletes who were abused by Larry Nassar at Michigan State. They came and testified at the committee hearings, and they were very strong supporters of this. But that bill passed, and now if you go to a doctor that's on probation for a number of offenses, you have to be notified of that and sign that you saw and received that doctor's on probation. And these are the conditions of that probation. So a lot of these things, and the PG&E explosion in San Bruno, the good thing about that for all of us is that I felt that we cannot have that happen again. We cannot allow those lives to be lost anywhere in California. And so we've worked hard to really create a safer infrastructure around the PG&E and the gas system that we have. And I'm really proud of that effort. And it's not just me, but it's so many others in the legislature made that happen. And with that fight for the last 10 years, and we just had a hearing mid-October, it was my last hearing actually that I chaired. It was a retrospect of the 10 years that what happened, what we've learned, and where we are going forward. But we really learned a lot in that 10 years and made major changes of the corruption that we found within the Public Utilities Commission, the diversion of hundreds of millions of dollars from PG&E, from safety to profits and bonuses, that all became disclosed in public, and the shame of that, and the deaths of the fires that we saw over the last couple of years placed PG&E in bankruptcy. And I was so honored, and I have so much appreciation for Governor Newsom. He has been one of the strongest and advocates for a safer utility. And we worked closely together as PG&E evolved and worked through the bankruptcy to make sure that as they came out of that bankruptcy, they were going to be a safer company, or they weren't going to exit bankruptcy at all, and they would be dissolved. But I was fortunate to be able to author SB 360, and that bill states that if they fail again, if they do not perform as expected and as we know the way they're supposed to, if they cause the wildfires and do not improve their system, then automatically the Public Utilities Commission will dissolve them and remove their license of convenience and necessity of allowing them to be a utility. And a new company will automatically come in and buy the assets of PG&E, and that's the Golden State Energy Company. It will be a ratepayer-owned, public benefit, nonprofit corporation that will buy the company through their assets. The money will come from the Infrastructure Bank of California, and it won't be cheap, probably about $50 billion, but the ratepayers will then own the company and operate it going forward. So we have an exit strategy there. So I've been honored to represent this area for so long, and for the 30 years in different roles. I think, as we've seen in the last couple of days, what I've tried not to lose sight of, and you've all kept me honest in that, is I know who I work for. And I've always remembered that the million people that we represent, somebody says, oh, it's great, you don't have anyone to push you, don't have any bosses. I got a million bosses that are there all the time. And I never lose sight of the importance of them and all of you for being there. And in this district, which is probably one of the most, this is probably Santa Monica, that area that Ben Allen has, probably the toughest areas in the state for holding elected officials accountable, responsible, and making sure that they don't they work hard, and there's no lacks of energy in that. So thank you for that, for always being there, reminding me of that responsibility and of your great roles in doing that. It's really been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Ashley, do you want to go first? But
Yeah,
I also want to then
my
claim
hand's up
next.
because I want to go first.
Okay.
I've
I want to go
got the-
second then.
Okay. Okay, Jerry, I guess as of today, we can just call you Jerry, right?
You can call me anything you want. Jerry worked great. That's my name.
Okay, so Jerry, here's the $64,000
Oh, what
question.
happened here? I lost myself here. There we go.
The $64,000 question. What are you going to do now? And what do you think about the idea that a lot of people have that you should become the chair of the California Public Utilities Commission?
Well, thanks, Ashley. That's a good question. The interesting thing about what to do now, and you know, and I've thought about this a lot in life. We've all probably have had the same feeling. You know, as you go through life, there's always kind of a trajectory, and it's always going in this direction, a little up, meaning that you've got a position or a job, and you may not be looking, which I've never, which is honest. When I became a city council member, I did not want to go any higher than that. My goal was to do that for 12 years and then go back into private life and not be part of it. But after doing it for 8 years, and there was an opening, and I said, oh, that sounds intriguing, and I wanted to do more what I thought was good work. And so I did that. So there was always a trajectory where you always had opportunities out there. Interestingly, today there aren't any of those for me that I look at. I mean, I don't look at anything that is that next step or something that has opened up right in front of me. And that's a little exciting because there's so many things I want to do that are not related to work and other things that it's exciting to be able to maybe do some of that. And then that'll probably last 2 days. And then I'll be wanting to do something else. But the Public Utilities Commission is a big job, and it's intriguing. Maribel Batcher, who's the new president of the PUC, was selected by the governor to make the changes that we've seen, and she's done some great work there. So, I mean, it's certainly out there, not necessarily being the chair, but being a member of the Public Utilities Commission. But it sounds like a real job, and I don't know if I'm up for another real job right now. But thanks, Ashley.
All right, am I next up?
Yep.
So Jerry, I chair the California Legislative Task Force. And so I went back and I reviewed your bills, and one of the things I want to say is I hadn't realized how many. And so the numbers are just staggering. You were in the legislature between the Assembly and the Senate from 2009 until now. You've authored 154 bills that have been signed and 199 that you were a co-author. I mean, this is, and I remember one of my cousins, she lived in the Sacramento area, and she would read in the Sacramento Bee, and she'd call me and she'd say, now, isn't this your local guy, this Jerry? And I'd say, oh, yes. And she goes, do you know he had the most bills signed this year? Mm-hmm. And she would call me every year to say the same comment. And I want to say kudos. I mean, amazing. And one of the things that I really, really liked was you did, and I think this came from Joe Simidian originally, but the ought to be a law, and you had your contest every year. And I was going through some of the winners, and this is the one that caught my eye because it was so important in yesterday's election. This was SB 589 in 2013, and it was creating the system that allowed you to check that your ballot had been received and processed. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea that you had done that, Jerry, and I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
That was so important, I think, for every voter this year. And so my question to you, Jerry, is you've done so much. Is there something that you left undone? Is there something you're passing on, whether it's to Kevin Mullen in the Assembly or Josh Becker, who's coming into the Senate? Is there something left undone, and are you passing the baton?
Well, it's, passing the baton, but I think what's important, Susie, and thank you for the reminder. It's interesting, and I'll answer that. In terms of the bills, I had a reputation. Kevin DeLeon, the former president pro tem of the Senate, he would say, and the reputation is, oh hell yeah, his motto is no bill left behind. And that's what I would do, is I'd always either amend a bill that I had that wasn't going anywhere. I'd have another idea and we'd put it in there and try to move it forward. So no bill left behind. But in terms of what I'd like, I would really hope that the issue of utilities, because frankly, when the San Bruno explosion occurred, I found dealing with utilities, gas and electricity, I found it fairly boring as a subject. It wasn't something, it was kind of technical and wasn't very, very exciting, but it was important to me to do. And as a constant reminder, I had the names of the 8 people who lost their lives in San Bruno. They were framed in my desk all the time. So I would see them to remind me to keep fighting for them so that this doesn't happen again. So I hope, because knowing these companies as we do, and it's like like a curve, and like everything, it's going to change, and we can't get back to where we were before, and someone needs to spend the time to do that. So I hope within that genre of area, that area, that we monitor and watch and make sure that it is done in a proper way. So I hope that that's something that I think is important. And I don't know, I've talked to Josh, and hopefully he can continue watching that. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Marshall.
Yeah, Jerry, I would like to thank you. As you know, sometimes we were a thorn in your side, but you won't say that. But
I'm shaking my head. Yes,
we
Marshall, I'm
tried to
agreeing.
pay attention to the issues that we felt were really important and great concern. And when we went to speak, you can't hear me?
I
Can you hear
can
me?
now. Yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, okay. And so when we went to see you with some of our issues that we were in favor of, some of which we were very passionate for, you had always done your homework, and you taught us too. And you pointed out things that we hadn't really considered. And we greatly appreciate how much effort you put in to do the job so right. And I just wanted to thank you so much for doing such a great job at it.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot. Thank you.
All right, next up is Susie McKee, and then we've got Greg and then Elsa.
Okay, hi, Jerry. So I come to bury Caesar and to praise him. So my only, I'm the GMO girl. I don't know if you remember, came to your office, tried to get you to
I do.
look at the GMO stuff. And it's the only thing, I mean, I think you've done a great job in other ways. So just want to remind that, because I think that's still a huge issue. People don't realize that what they're putting into their bodies is making them sick over the long term. It's a poison, not an immediate, it's not a poison, it's a toxin. So, I mean, it's poisonous, but anyway. But so my question is about PG&E. So I just want to bring it up anytime I get a chance, because I think it's vital. It's like the air quality, the food quality, the water quality. It doesn't get any more basic than that. But I wondered about the PG&E stuff. So because I think, wasn't some of the recent fires, weren't they caused? Didn't they say they were caused by PG&E? And doesn't that take them down then? Or what do they have to do to get taken down?
Sure. Well, thanks, Susie. And you're right. It does. The fires have been caused, it looks like, by PG&E, but it's the extent of the fires is what we're looking at now. And part of the criteria is how, it's almost how damaging. I mean, there were not that many, I shouldn't say that to me, one is too many, but one house was burned, or it was not the catastrophe that we saw last year and the year before that was so devastating throughout the state. I mean, things are going to happen as they improve their system. But I was, KCBS interviewed me on Sunday for last week. The PG&E was being, they had to report on their power shutoff in October. You know, they had their PSPS event in October. And this goes to basically the other cities comment on what we need to do to monitor in the future is they reported that in areas where they turned the power off, went back after the storm and after the wind, and they realized that there were I don't remember, a dozen or so failures of their system. There were wires down, there were trees that knocked them down and caused problems. But fortunately, because they turned the power off, it did not start a fire. Well, when we look at those areas, and they were in the Santa Cruz Mountains, one in San Mateo County and one in Sacramento County, the wind was only, where they had power lines that fell, the wind was only blowing 35 miles an hour. So what I don't want to see happen, and what I think is necessary, is that we're looking at these PSPS events, and I don't even like to use that expression because it's becoming too normal. It's becoming too standardized, because we should not have any PSPS events. Their system should be resilient and strong enough, because 35 miles an hour should not knock a pole down or knock a wire down. And up in the Sierras, it was 75 miles an hour, and these lines are supposed to handle even up to 70 miles an hour. But there they had problems as well, which is a little more understandable. But if we start accepting the fact that every year they're going to shut our power off for 4 days or 3 days, that's totally unacceptable. And I believe they're going to try to get us to start accepting that as the new normal. And that's where somebody needs to be following up on them closely and carefully. And the governor realizes this, and his staff and team that I work closely with, they know that too. So they're putting a lot of pressure on them. But that's really where we need the greater diligence. But it can't be just starting a fire to do that. It has to be in numbers of fires, numbers of negligence areas, and malfeasance on their part, if there is, and some of the other things. It's not just one event that would trigger that from the PUC.
Okay. And the other thing that's interesting, I've got a friend who's a lawyer in San Diego who does fire cases. And he told me years ago that it's not only when it breaks or falls down, it's the arcing. If two wires, that's the arc that comes off that is hotter than the surface of the sun. So
right, and it arcs and it falls down. And if they have not cleared around their equipment as they should, that starts the fire on the ground.
Exactly.
That has happened very much so, especially 2 years ago in the Tubbs fire, I think. So thank you.
So don't forget the GMOs, but
GMO, I won't forget it.
All right. Next up is Greg.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey, Greg, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. I want to take advantage of your presence here and all your experience and all your bills and all your dedication and all your feelings about what's right and wrong and everything you've shown that's been great for us. I want to ask you the same question I asked the group just before you came onto this program. And that has to do with something much broader than us here, and certainly broader than California. And the question is, why is it that still 50% of the population of this country has gone for Trump, even though it's obvious that this man is a monster in so many different ways? And why is it that the population, unlike San Mateo County, hasn't realized what this man is responsible for? What is it? What is the block that keeps these people? I mean, people have said it's the media, it's not the media, it's the need for a strong man. But what do you think?
Well, and that's a great question. And I'll tell you, Greg, and it's good to see you, by the way, as well. But as I've given that some thought lately, and that was kind of a first experience for me when I got to the legislature, is when I got to the legislature, I started meeting people from areas of Southern California that were talking about things that I didn't relate to. And this is in terms of whether it's diversity issues, whether it was public safety issues, discrimination. I mean, these were people who were born with silver spoons in their mouth, and they did not have the same values that I shared and that I grew up with. And it was amazing, but it taught me that there are a lot of people are different, and in those areas it is different. But I think what Trump has done, and it goes back to what Tip O'Neill said when he was, obviously a Speaker of the House, in his book, and is saying, and I've got the book actually right here, all politics is local. And when you look at it, it's what affects them locally, what hits their pocketbook, and what hits if they're not being affected by COVID-19, they're looking at it's affecting my pocketbook today and the economy, and it's all personal to them. And they will look at him, because you're right. I heard you mention it earlier. You need that strong leader. And I was talking to Jackson Vanderbecken, who's the investigative reporter for NBC Bay Area today. And there's a lot of Hitler resemblance here in the way that devotion, that dedication that he, and I heard somebody say, if he came out and shot someone, it would make a difference on the streets of New York. He is that powerful because of that persona, and people are hungry for someone to lead them in a direction that's not negatively affecting them. And they look at him as solving a lot of their fears, whether it's the immigration threat that they feel, the economic threat that they feel, their businesses closed because of COVID that they feel, the fact that they can't get out of their house. Those are all the things that the violence that they feel, the border that they feel. All of these threats that they perceive because they've lived in these isolated communities that doesn't give them the value of diversity that we cherish in this area and the differences that we have. To me, that's what they're seeing. They look at their life as being threatened, and he's the savior coming to protect them in that. He's going to solve all of their problems. We can put up with some of his idiosyncrasies or whatever, however you want to call them, his abuses and all of those things, because that's not getting us what we need, which is the protection of our community, the border protection, the economic protection, and those things. All politics is local, and that's what protects them. And that's how I believe they see it. Sorry for the long answer, Greg.
Good answer.
But it's such a lie. That's what's like, huh? Anyway.
Yeah, I know it's all BS, but that's what's doing it. I mean, that's the problem with it. So it's so self-centered, but that's exactly what he is, and they're looking at it in their own self-interest. But I'll tell you, you look at so many issues in the Bay Area, and look at Palo Alto. Look at Palo Alto in the park issue, opening the park. There's a perfect example. Or some of the NIMBY things that we see around. Nobody wants any affordable housing. I mean, when I was a county supervisor, it was easier to cite a methadone clinic than it was to cite a homeless shelter. I mean, that's how difficult it is, because it was all about somebody's little neighborhood and protecting it. And I'm being sarcastic here and cynical about it, but that's the reality. And we magnify that around this country. And you're in Ohio, where all you see are, bottom line, all you see are white people in your community, all going to church on Sunday, all, going to either to Pentecostal churches, that, however it is, that's your life. And you see that threatened when you look at the East or West coasts. And this guy comes along, looks like you, and sounds like what you're thinking. And you're going to you're going to support him, and you're going to turn your back and your head to some of those things that aren't right, but you'll ignore that because you like what he does say.
Yeah, and he gives you permission to say it out loud.
Yes, he does.
So all those things that people have thought privately, now they can say out loud because the president says it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, on to Elsa.
Elsa.
You're
Oh,
muted.
Muted, Elsa.
Sorry. I so
There
rarely
you are,
There you go.
Elsa.
myself, as you all well know. Sorry, Jerry, thank you so
I
much.
was just thinking, Elsa, before you start, when I saw you and you asked a question, I said, uh-oh, I'm worried about this, because Elsa's always has a tough question. She's a good one.
Jerry,
No, it's in a loving way. It's a nice way. But I know it's always it's always very thoughtful.
Well, good. Thank you. Well, I'll get to that part of it. I just wanted to say, though, Greg, thank you so much for asking the question. And Jerry, your answer, the thing I've been carrying around with me for 24 hours is that that I think the guy in the White House has summarized a lot of fears in this country and around racism.
Mhm.
And I think he's used that as a blanket, a cocoon within which to summarize a lot of people's worries and fears, says there's where to put the blame. And I think that's why the polls aren't as accurate as we'd like to think, because maybe when you answer on the phone, you think, well,
Right.
tell them this, but my husband was very dark skinned and my children are mixed race. And I woke up today, or I went to sleep last night thinking, oh my God, racism is, so deeply embedded. But I do have a question for you, Jerry, which is one of my biggest wishes, other than things like single payer, universal health care for us all, is publicly funded elections, but at a far lower level of spending, so that you can siphon off a tiny percentage of the airwaves and give it to people who get a certain number of signatures or something. And I remember Prop 15 in like 2010 when we were trying to push that through, and it had plenty of flaws about it, no kidding. But I just wonder what you see as the possibility, or if you see a path for the possibility of California helping lead that way with I'd love a lot of examples, but at least with some examples. And I know Ann Ravel is running for
Mhm.
Jim Bell's seat, and not ahead in that race right now. I don't think it's
No.
called yet, though. But as FEC chair and former FPPC chair, she is so conscious of how difficult it is when you add money to the equation. And I'd love us to copy England and say, no private special interest money. And we get a tiny bit of, the airwaves or whatever the pot is. But we would spend so much less money than the 11 billion that was just spent on these races. And in the states and cities where it's been done so far, the candidates, Republican and Democrat, say, this is fabulous. I actually get to spend time talking with my constituents and reading and doing real legislation. And I know what I'm talking about, rather than 70% of the time on the phone fundraising. Do you see?
You're absolutely right. And the one thing that I learned early in the legislature and saw it play out so much more in policy is just how corrupting within the system money is in election. And no one is corrupt in the sense that they're not, benefiting personally for any of this. But the fact that they are campaigning and raising money continuously in the legislature, and the fact that they get it from these special interests, and then those special interests come and they want something from you. And there was a saying, what was it just recently? You go back to Jesse Unruh and that quote that he said that time, and so forgive me, I'm going to say it, but it's it's what he said. He said, campaign fund money is the mother's milk of politics, and if you can't take their money, sleep with their women, smoke their cigars, and all kinds of other things, and then vote against them the next day, you shouldn't be here. And that corresponds to what's currently said, the idea, which is very true, that is the challenge with being elected today is that everyone wants you to give you something. They expect to give you money. And if you take it and do what they want you to do, you'll go to jail. But if you don't give them something, then you probably won't get elected the next time. And that's the problem. You don't have to give them what they want, but you've got to give them something. And that, I think, is a true reflection of what we're seeing in politics today. And it gets worse, not because it's the candidate, you know, and to run for the legislature, I think the maximum is $4,700 today as a contribution to you, but it's the special interest in the independent expenditures that raise millions for these candidates. And you know where that money is. I was fighting over the weekend. Sunday, I was on the phone, actually it was Saturday, it was Halloween, with the lobbyist for PG&E, because he put $75,000 into an independent expenditure for Dave Cortese against Ann Ravel. And I'm an Ann Ravel fan. I was supporting Ann, but I called him and I said, I don't understand what you're doing here. I said, you're giving money. I said, we're trying to see this company turn around and be a better company. Yet you're trying to create enemies now by investing here, because there are people like myself in the legislature who will be here next year who are supporting that, who are not going to be happy with that. So it all so much revolves around money in the legislature. And it's not direct money, you know, to me, it's campaign money, it's independent expenditures. And almost every decision is money. And though that issue, campaign funding, is part of the equation for the answer to that question that comes up in your mind. And that's not right. You shouldn't have to think about that at all. And it should not be part of good policy. Gene Mullen, former assembly member that I replaced in the assembly, when he first got to the assembly, I was a county supervisor. I said, what did you learn? This was like 6 months after he got in office. So what's the big thing? He says, politics trumps policy 80% of the time. And the politics he's referring to is the money. And that I don't believe has changed at all. And it's not just one party. I mean, you look at the Democratic Party, great party, member, love it, but labor, organized labor, is the backbone of the funding of almost everything that the Democratic Party does. Comes from labor, the organized labor, whether it's the firefighters, the police officers, not as much now because of some of the issues, obviously, but building trades council, that's where all the money comes. And then the Republicans, it's the business interests that fund all of their efforts, whether it's the millions of dollars that go into these IEs for candidates that the Democrats support. In the Senate this year, it looks like we're going to turn over two or three Republican senatorial seats in Orange County and elsewhere. We're bringing back Josh Newman, it looks like, who was in the Senate. He's winning, but that was all done with special interest, millions of dollars that they invested, and most of that comes from labor. And that's really, it's shameful. And it's because and I've seen, decisions based on that fact. And you're absolutely right, Elsa. So I'm sorry for the long answer, but I agree with you. If we could have public funding of campaigns, it would make life a lot better for, I think, our state.
Jerry, you just gave this beautiful speech for, instead of going to the PUC, I want you to head the, we'll get Bill Moyers in here too, but the public
funding.
Yeah. I'll figure out a sexy name for it. Todd, you just, your specific examples as well as your summary points, that was brilliant. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to round it up with just kind of coming back to that. Do you see that being something we could do? Is there any hope in California? I mean, it might take 20 years, but is there something that we really should, because we're a great group for working on something like that.
I know you're great at at fighting, and once you get your issue involved, here's why I don't think it will work. And I hate to be the negative one here, but on the election disclosure stuff that we worked so hard over the last few years, the Disclose Act.
Yep.
And the
Right.
stuff that now when you see a campaign and it has listed all that information that's so valuable to tell us to educate and be transparent as to who's paying for these ads, that's so critical. But we had to, that was fought so hard, and I said, by organized labor.
Yes.
They did not want that disclosure because
watered
they
it
didn't
down.
want to have, they didn't want that transparency so that people would know it was AFSCME or SEIU or Building Trades that was funding these ads that didn't have anything to do with building trades or didn't have anything to do with some of these other things. So they were the biggest fighter. Now, I'm not picking on labor in that. It goes the same with business would fight that, because that would silence them in their ability to get what they want with the money that they spend during an election, either through an independent expenditure or through something else. That's why I would love to see it, but that's why I don't think it will happen. Just like I didn't think we would be able to change Prop 13 in this election this year, because I just knew how it was going to go. This was in terms of the split roll, in that they would frame it in a way with all the money they spent. God, they're coming after us today. They're going to come after you tomorrow. And that's exactly the line that I heard on that thing. And I said that 2 years ago, that's what they would use. And we'd never see the change, because it gets, again, it's all politics is local. And for business or labor, they're going to be protective of their ability to spend their money to get what they want and who they want elected. And so that's a sad part of it. And the legislature will look at that. And what you would find is there may be a bill to do it. The bill would be introduced. It would get a hearing perhaps, and then it would see a quiet death somewhere in the process, because those interests would get the leadership in some way say, we don't want to see this, and it will die.
Yeah. And we're seeing the similar thing with the ballot initiatives. So, but I think that I have to turn this over to Ashley, because I think that our time is up.
Oh,
And
thank you.
Jerry, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for letting me be with you. Thank you for the recognition tonight. Thank you.
Woo-hoo. You haven't heard the last of us, Jerry.
I hope not.
And hopefully we haven't heard the last from you. So yes.
Thank you.
Ashley, Ashley, you're on mute.
Ashley?
You're still muted.
Nobody's
There you
paying
go.
attention to me. So Jerry, thank you so much. This time just flew by, and this was wonderful. We know that we're going to let you relax for a week or two, and then we expect you to get back on that treadmill and work for a better future for all of us. We want you to stay in touch with us. Oh, I have an idea. I would love for you to join our club now that you're a private citizen.
I could do that. That's a good point. I was looking online today and I saw the application. So let me go back and take a look at that and see what happens.
Okay, great. So
Thank you all.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
And we will see you again. Oh,
I hope so. It was great. It's great to all the
Casey
friendly
wanted to say
faces. Thank
something.
you.
Casey, go.
Yeah, well, I just feel as treasurer of the club that I'm the person that can certainly honor Jerry by offering him an honorary membership. What do you think?
yes.
Oh,
Honorary member.
no, I appreciate that, but I
We
will
want
be
his
happy to
commitment.
pay for that
No,
membership. So
no.
thank you.
We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
All right, that's good. Thank
You
you.
will definitely hear from us.
All right, that's
Thank
good. I
you,
appreciate
Jerry.
it, Ashley.
Thank you.
everyone very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.